Welcome to the CBS Library's virtual online writing workshop. My name is Thomas Basbøll. I'm the resident writing consultant here at the CBS Library. And this workshop is a very hands-on experience in how I approach the composition of individual paragraphs. I believe personally that academic writing is the art of writing down what you know for the purpose of discussing it with other knowledgeable people. So I want you to, when you're writing in this workshop, I want you to keep another knowledgeable person in mind as your interlocutor, as your reader, as the person that you are pitching your ideas to. And the other thing to keep in mind is that in academia, writing is a very, very important part of the competence of knowing. I'm not going to go through its entire relationship to knowledge, or as I see it, its entire relationship. But I will say that I think as academics, we should not say that we know something until we know, or until we are aware, know that we can compose a coherent prose paragraph about that something. So we know, if we know something, we can compose a coherent prose paragraph about it. And that's what we're going to do today. We're going to look at what that competence is in practice. And one of the things I always say as kind of a challenge, some people find this a little bit draconian, a little bit formal, but it's quite nice to have some formal definitions. Think of a paragraph as at least 6 sentences and at most 200 words that says one thing. And think of your competence. We'll go through a little bit more about what it says, but think of your competence as the ability to compose such a thing, at least 6 sentences and at most 200 words in 27 minutes. So what we're going to do today is to work through how to spend 27 minutes composing a single paragraph about something you know. And that's going to require that you pick something that you know, and that you also choose in your mind a reader or a panel of readers, of peers, people that you consider intellectual equals, people whose opinions and knowledge you respect. And one way I put this is you want to pick somebody who is qualified to tell you that you are wrong if you are, right? So the reason you're presenting these ideas is not really to impress them. It's not, even though we do write to get published, but that's not the driving force of writing a paragraph. What we're doing is we're writing to expose our ideas to the criticism of people whose knowledge we respect. So the clarity of the writing, we're going to pick something that we're quite sure we know. So we're not going to be worried about whether or not we're right. But what we're going to try to make sure is that the quality of the writing is such that if it's not right, then our competent, qualified reader has every possible opportunity to correct us. So we give them a way into our ideas through our writing. It's not so much a question of expressing something or getting the reader to side with us on some issue. It is much more a question of opening these ideas to criticism. And I think you'll see what I mean when we get going. Let me share not my screen, but my desktop. I have this little environment here that I've created for myself. And what we're going to do is imagine that this isn't a writing workshop online. We're going to imagine that this is actually your own writing practice, your own writing process. And we're going to suggest, and what I'd like to suggest is that you always think about it in terms of something like this, that you say there's one day, today's Thursday, and it's Thursday evening, and that you could actually be doing this from today to tomorrow morning, to Friday. And so we're going to pretend that the writing moment that we're just about to have isn't actually happening now. We will have it happen now, but it's ideally, it would happen tomorrow morning, and it would last 27 minutes and a 3-minute break. So let's say 8 o'clock just for fun. And then at the end of the day before, which would be today, right about now in Copenhagen, maybe in a couple of hours at about 6 o'clock, you will make a decision about what to write in this writing moment the next day. So today we're going to pretend that this is happening, about 10 or 12 hours before the actual writing. But today we'll just have it happen and we'll go right to the writing. But it is actually very important to keep in mind that under normal circumstances, you would have made a decision about what to write, and then you would have relaxed and you would have slept on it, and then you would write the next day. So the question is, what are we going to write? Well, you may have heard Hemingway's idea that the dignity of the movement of an iceberg lies in only 1/8 of it being above water. But the idea of writing with the dignity of an iceberg can be a little bit imposing. So I'm going to propose we write with the dignity of an ice cube, something a little more manageable. And what we'll do is we will say that this ice cube is going to represent, sorry, we don't need that, is going to represent our paragraph. And remember what I'm saying here is that if you know something, then you are in a position to compose a coherent prose paragraph about it. And this paragraph will have at least 6 sentences and at most 200 words. All right, this is sentences. This is words. I apologize for the small writing. And you will be able to write one in 27 minutes. This is going to be the competence that you want to develop. So the surface of your writing process is going to be composing at least 6 sentences and at most 200 words in 27 minutes. Now, these at least 6 sentences and 200 words will always say one thing, and that one thing we will call the key sentence. So we're going to come up with a key sentence for a paragraph. Some of you may already be familiar with composing paragraphs in terms of writing topic sentences and concluding sentences. So the topic sentence would usually be the first sentence, and the concluding sentence would come at the end, and that would kind of bookend your paragraph. But the method that I like to use just has one sentence that is the key sentence, and it can go anywhere in the paragraph where it stylistically fits. And when we do feedback, we'll see why that's actually quite an interesting feature of it, because one of the things you can ask your reader is, which sentence do you think the key sentence is, right? And it's not necessarily the first one. So keep that in mind. So there'll be a key sentence, and it will be, and that key, the rest of the paragraph will then support, sorry, that was very hard to read. That says support, elaborate, or defend. I really apologize for the handwriting there. Maybe it's just my glasses. Support, elaborate, or defend. And a really good question now is, when should we do which? And in a moment, when you start writing, what you will do is you'll need to make some decisions about that. And this is where the reader is very, very important. Think about what you want to say, and then think about why the reader needs a whole paragraph for that idea. Why can that key sentence that you're going to write not just stand alone? Why do you need to say at least 6 sentences and at most 200 words of support, elaboration, or defense? And that's because it's going to be hard to, the reader will find it hard to believe, understand, or agree with. Those are the 3 standard options you have, the 3 standard difficulties that a paragraph helps the reader overcome. Either you're going to say something that the reader says, I understand what that means, but before I believe it, I'm going to want some evidence. Could be something very banal, like you have found that the employees in a company are not satisfied with their remuneration agreements, their wages, right? And so what you might do is you'll say, I have surveyed them and the surveys show that they're not satisfied, or I've interviewed them and here are the sorts of things they say, right? So the reader says, well, I understand what it means for employees not to be satisfied, and I'm willing to believe it. I just want your evidence, right? So you're going to write a paragraph that supports that claim. Alternatively, you could write something of a more theoretical nature, like sense-making is a retrospective process. That could be your key sentence. And then knowing the discipline that you're working in, you realize, well, I'm going to have to be a little more precise by what I mean by process or what I mean by retrospective. And in those cases, usually that has to do with operationalizing your terms in such a way, not that the reader comes from not understanding what the word means to suddenly understanding what the word means, but already knowing what the word means and now knowing exactly how you're going to use it, right? Which is still improving their understanding. It's just getting your meaning. That's the important thing. So you would spend the rest of the paragraph elaborating. And then there's the last possibility for a paragraph, which is, to my mind, the most interesting one, but not the only. The other two are, of course, very, very common. This is where you decide what you want to say, and then you think of your reader, and you realize that your reader has already thought quite a bit about this and has made up their mind and thinks you're wrong. So you're going to say something, and the reader and you're expecting your reader to disagree with you. So the reader will find it hard to agree. And so what you're going to do is defend the claim that you're making. I always emphasize defend because you only have 200 words. So you have about 1 minute of your reader's attention, and you don't want to spend that minute attacking the reader. You want to defend your point of view and give the reader time throughout the reading of your essay, or throughout, after reading it and throughout the weeks of thinking about it. That's when that defense finally will win them over. It's not like you're going to change their mind in this moment. Remember, think about your situation as an academic writer. What this means is you are a knowledgeable person. You are in principle in a position to write these paragraphs in support, elaboration, or defense. And one thing I should specify, because otherwise it'll come up, is this is an or, not an and. So you're trying to make a decision between supporting, elaborating, and defending. You want to make a choice. You want to do one thing. As Kierkegaard says, purity of the heart is to will one thing. Right? So that's what you want to do here. Tiago has a question.
Yes, thank you very much for the workshop. I have a small question. You were arguing the idea that your key sentence can go anywhere against the methods to open or to close a certain paragraph. My question is, what would be the criteria that can help us to position perfectly that key sentence that she can really achieve our goal to support, elaborate, or defend an idea?
That's a great question. I would say there are no criteria that I can give you for sure. It really depends on what the nature of the key sentence and the sort of argument you want to make. What happens is, and you'll discover this as you play around with it, sometimes you need just a quick kind of a throat clearing sentence before you start, and then you deliver the key sentence, and then you can go. Right? Sometimes it's a really good way of writing a paragraph is to set up all the premises and then just use the key sentence at the end as a conclusion. Sometimes you want to arrange half of your story up to the pivotal moment, which is the key sentence, and then tell the rest of the story as a kind of denouement afterwards. So it really depends on the project that you set yourself in that paragraph. So I'm going to say it's so contextual that I almost want to be mystical about it and say it's an art, it's style. There are no criteria. There's just your choices, whatever sounds right, feels right to you. I would say if you want a general rule, a lot of readers, both of dissertations and journal articles, really are grateful for the simple declarative key sentence at the beginning of each paragraph, because it eases the reading, the ability to scan a paper, but it's not necessarily the most satisfying stylistic decision. So though it's very much up to you, and I don't want to specify any criteria for that. Today you'll try one way of doing it, and then maybe in the future when you write paragraphs, you'll try all kinds of other ways, and you'll discover what works for you. I hope that's not too unprescriptive, but
no, thank you. Yeah. Perfect.
Yeah. Good. So let's get started. What I want you to do is imagine that it is the end of the day. And by the end of the day, I mean, it's sort of the moment of the day when you realize you're not going to get any smarter. You're not going to acquire any new knowledge. You're not going to become a wittier conversationalist. You're not going to be able to contribute more. You're going to start relaxing. You'll sleep, and then tomorrow you'll start back at the task of learning things and being a researcher and inquirer. So at that moment, we can ask, well, what is something that you know? And so what I'm going to do now, and these are all timed exercises, I'm going to give you 2 minutes to make a list of things you know something about. And what I'd like you to do is to make a list of 1, 2, or 3 word names of those things. So give them labels. If you need 4 words, that's fine. But you're not writing sentences and you're not writing descriptions. You're naming things like entrepreneurship is maybe something you know something about. Maybe you know something about market entry. Maybe you know something about China. Maybe you know something about Europe, right? So words like that. Maybe you know something about a particular product, like an iPhone or electric cars or something like that. Maybe you know something about a service like Uber, right? So names like that. And I'm going to give you 2 minutes, which is, you'll realize that's quite a lot of time. And I want you to make a list and spend the 2 minutes making a list of maybe 3, 4, 5, or 6 things, and maybe removing some if you think they're not quite interesting after all, or that you don't maybe know as much about them as you think you should, so that you end up with a list of 3 or 4 items that you know well and you think are interesting. All right? Does that make sense? And you're not thinking about what you know about them yet. You're just coming up with names of things that you feel you know something about. And I'm going to give you 2 minutes to do that, and time you on that. So you'll see here. Whoops. There. Go. 2 minutes. So as you can see, 30 seconds have passed. And it's okay to do it under a little bit of pressure. Just sort of feel that the time is passing. You're coming up with things that you know something about. We've got about 30 seconds left. So you're also now thinking about maybe removing some that you don't know very well after all, maybe you don't find too interesting. You want to have a list of about 3 or 4 items by the end. All right. That was 2 minutes. That was 2 minutes of you coming up with things that you know something about. I think I'm just going to stop sharing that. There we go. Now what I'm going to do is give you 3 minutes to do something, to do another couple of things. Now, remember, you've got this list of items. You've also thought about what interests you about them. I'm going to give you 3 minutes to come up with sentences that are true of those things. Keep in mind that these are sentences that you want to be able to use as potential key sentences, which means you also, as you're thinking about them, you're going to write some sentences that you know are true, however many you can. And then what you will do is you will say, I'm going to pitch this to a reader who is knowledgeable in my subject, but it has to have that difficulty, right? It has to be a little hard to believe, a little hard to understand, or a little hard to agree with. You want to make sure that there is that sense of difficulty to them, so there's more work to be done with them. And then I will remind you when you have about a minute left. But in the last minute, what I'm going to ask you to do is pick one. So you're going to pick one, and that's going to be your decision for what you will write a paragraph about for the next 27 minutes. All right, so here we go. I'm going to start the timer again. For 3 minutes. And try to write as many sentences as you write, 2 or 3 sentences, so you have something to choose from. And then at the end, you'll have to choose one of those sentences. Keep it simple and declarative. So just a couple of examples, like sense making is a retrospective process. That would be the kind of sentence we're looking for. Or I've done 27 semi-structured interviews. That would also be a perfectly good one. Or the internet has changed the way businesses communicate with their customers. It's a good one, right? That kind of a statement that you know to be true and that you have some reason for thinking is true. Here we go. I'm going to give you 3 minutes to write some sentences. One minute has passed. You have 2 minutes left. All right, you now have 1 minute left. So we're getting to the point where you want to choose which sentence you're going to use as your key sentence. You don't have to make too many other decisions about it. Just decide which one you think is most interesting and one you know well enough to write a whole paragraph about. All right. That was 3 minutes. You now should have a sentence that you know to be true and that you feel that you know well enough to write a paragraph about. Of course, that feeling is going to be tested, so that's fine. That's perfectly normal. What we're going to do now is what I'd like we're going to pretend now very quickly, we're going to pretend in about a minute that an entire evening and night has passed. Because ideally, you would do this the day before you're writing. You would then relax, try to put it out of your mind. You don't want to be thinking about this for the rest of the evening and then dreaming about it at night. You want your unconscious to be able to deal with this sentence. And then you want to bring that prepared unconsciousness to your writing the next day. That's the sort of, I realize that sounds a little bit like mysticism, but that is what writers say, that if your unconscious knows what it's going to do tomorrow, it's going to have, you're going to have better prose that coming out of that. Of course, we're not going to wait until tomorrow to continue the workshop, so we'll just go right into it now. The wonderful thing about giving yourself a key sentence and a 27-minute writing moment, this one, what we're going to try to do is open that up a little bit into another, so that we can see what's going on in it. And we'll just say, this is not the page, this is our moment. And because we know we're now going to spend exactly 27 minutes writing this paragraph, we know there are the first 2 minutes of that, and we know there are the last 5 minutes. And then in between, there's going to be 20 minutes. And we can divide that with some simple math into 2. And so what we can do is we can say there's 2 minutes, 10 minutes, 10 minutes, and 5 minutes. And so this is kind of like any other structured exercise. If you go for a run, you know how far you're going to go. And maybe you've even planned out some intervals for the training. If you're practicing music, you're going to practice some scales. You've got some warm-up exercises. So the session is structured. And I want you to think about the same way when you're writing these paragraphs. And we'll work through it just step by step. So we'll start with these first 2 minutes. It's important to keep in mind that what's really going on here is you get up in the morning, you get ready to start your day, and then there's the first intellectually challenging thing you're going to do. You're going to write a paragraph, and you'll start right at 8 o'clock. When you decided you would. Try not to start too early or too late. Try to start right on time. And the hard thing there is to, when you've got a writing moment set up, is to start on time and then know exactly what you have to do. But the great thing about this method is you've already given yourself a key sentence the day before, right? So we're going to write the key sentence in the first 2 minutes. What that means is at exactly 8 o'clock, so exactly when I say go right now, I'm going to give you 2 minutes to type or write if you're writing this out by hand. Although actually, no, I need you to be typing because otherwise you can't share it for the feedback exercise. So don't write by hand. To type the key sentence that you've come up with. Type it slowly and deliberately. And think of your reader. So you're not just typing, you are actually writing, you're communicating this sentence in these first 2 minutes. You're communicating it to your reader, and you're thinking about how to make it hard to believe, hard to understand, or hard to agree with. The example I like to use is, suppose you want to tell your reader who thinks sense-making is always a retrospective process, that it's sometimes a prospective process. And your reader disagrees with you about that. Your reader thinks it's always retrospective. So what you might do is to write that key sentence by inverting it. So you might say, some people think that sense-making is always a retrospective process. The reader will immediately understand that the content of that sentence is that it is sometimes a prospective process, and that's the idea you're going to defend, right? So what you can do in these first 2 minutes is take that key sentence and think about it carefully, spend 2 minutes thinking carefully about how does this sentence activate in the mind of the reader a difficulty, right? Try to get the reader to expect you to do some work, right? Make this key sentence promise that you're going to deliver more material. How do you write the sentence in such a way that it makes that promise? That's what you're going to spend 2 minutes doing right now. As soon as I start the timer. I'm giving you 2 minutes now. Go. And you start typing right away. Got 1 minute left. If you're completely satisfied with it, try retyping it again. Just to make sure what you're doing is writing. Try not to just be thinking and struggling. You're actually writing. So make sure you work with that sentence, even if it's just putting all the words in the same order once again. Okay, and that is your 2 minutes. So now what you've got is a key sentence. And of course, in real life, you would just go straight on to the next task. I'm going to explain it to you, but you in real life, you would just go straight on to it. Right? We've worked on the key sentence. And now what we're going to do is just say we need at least 6 sentences. What we're going to do here is we're going to generate. Right? And our worry now is, are we going to have more than 6 sentences? We're going to give ourselves 10 minutes to write as many sentences as we can that are just as true as the key sentence, that are, of course, about the same thing because they're going to go in the same paragraph. We're not going to worry too much about it. Are they in the right order? Do they have the right logical relationship? All that kind of stuff. We're just going to write as many sentences as we can that are a little bit easier to believe, a little bit easier to understand, or a little bit easier to agree with, depending on how we have pitched this sentence, remember. So we spent a couple of minutes thinking about how is it hard? How is it difficult? And now we're going to write a whole bunch of sentences that are just as true, but a little bit easier. And they could be easier because they have sources. They could be easier because they're just quotations from your data. They could be easier because they are more elaborate, because they're telling the story in detail rather than, rather than telling the story from a very general perspective. So the sense in which they're easier is entirely up to you. The important thing is to spend the next 10 minutes writing as many sentences as you can. Don't worry about writing too many, and don't worry about them cohering as a paragraph. We'll have time to do that. So just write as many sentences as you can for 10 minutes. And I will jump in every once in a while and remind you of the passing time and give you some ideas about what you could be doing if you think you're done. But the overall project here is simply to write sentences, which means when you get stuck, when you can't think of another sentence, a very good thing to do is just to retype one of the sentences you already have. What you're trying to do is write roughly 1 sentence a minute. And I will try to keep you on task there as we go. So here we go. I'm going to give you your 10 minutes. And then you're going to write as many sentences as you can, not worrying too much about quality or coherence. What you are worried about is this something I know to be true? And you're trying to think about, is this easier to believe, understand, or agree with than my key sentence? Here we go. Two minutes have passed. So if you have two sentences, you're doing really great. Remember, this is your first time. So if you don't have two sentences, that's also fine. If you've got 5 or 6 sentences, maybe slow down a little. One sentence a minute will be roughly the right cadence you're looking for here. And this is not where you're trying to be brilliant. You're just trying to generate sentences. All right, you're halfway through. You spent about 5 minutes. You should have about 5 sentences if possible. Remember, if you don't, that's not a panic situation because this is your first time trying to work under these conditions, which are unreasonable in a certain way. So keep working. If you feel like you've run out of things to say, remember that you can just rewrite some of the sentences you've already got so that you're physically writing for those 10 minutes. Not sitting there thinking, but actually writing, physically writing words. You'll have a chance to compose them later on. You now have 3 minutes left. If I was your spinning coach, I would say, come on, you can do it. Go, go, 3 more sentences. You got them. Go. There are 2 minutes left. And now we're in the last minute. So if you can just get one more sentence, that would be great. If you think, what's one more thing I know about this? And we're on the final stretch here. Last 15 seconds. Great. We are now moving on to the next 10 minutes in our writing moment. And remember that in real life, you would just be going through this. And some of you may discover that 10 minutes is either not enough or way too long for this generative part of the exercise, and that you'd rather have less time for the composition stuff or more time for it. And so you can always move this time boundary if you wish, if you discover that's how that's best for you. And the other thing you can realize is that maybe one of the things you're discovering by working in this deliberate time-bound way is that half an hour is a long time to write a paragraph, and you would actually prefer to get it done quicker, in which case you can replace these 27 minutes with 18 minutes and then just compress everything. But we're going to do this in the full format for demonstration purposes. So we've got 10 minutes now. And what we're going to do is imagine the page. And we're going to say we have now a whole bunch of just scattered random sentences. It's maybe not very coherent. It could be a lot better. Of course, for some people, it all just flows out of them like prose. So it's already a paragraph. But what you're going to try to do is make something that looks like, like a paragraph. If you're working in Word, maybe you've even got that little paragraph marker at the end. And the idea really here is that you're going to spend 10 minutes composing a visually correct paragraph, but also a conceptually correct one. So what you want to do now is you want to say, what is the simplest possible statement? You want to, whoops, I never do that right. You always want to go under 200 words. So you want to take all of these sentences you've written and compose them into something that will take less than a minute to read. So you are occupying one ideal minute of your reader's attention. Think about it in those terms. It's going to fill about half to 3/4 of a page, depending on how you set up your line spacing and so forth, of course. But you're going to produce something that you can present to somebody, and it will take about a minute for them to read it. And of course, what you want to do is have them come away with the idea that you have, and you want to make sure they come away with a feeling that this was written in such a way that it's critically open, so that there was a way into it if they had objections to it. I'll give you 10 minutes, and I will interrupt you as we go to tell you what time it is, as it were. And keep in mind, this can be done very quickly. And so if you get done, then what I'm going to encourage you to do is to type and retype the whole paragraph again and again and again, as many times as is possible during those 10 minutes. Because one of the things that will then happen is you'll realize, well, that's kind of drudgery. So instead of retyping the paragraph, and instead of just sitting here doing nothing, I'm going to actually think about how to make the paragraph better. So spend 10 minutes looking for ways of making the best possible use of 1 minute of your reader's attention. Please remember, your reader is a peer that you respect, somebody whose time you think is valuable, and somebody where composing yourself in this way is a worthwhile exercise. All right, so remember, it's all about imagining the right reader. You have something to say to them, and you've got 1 minute of their attention. Decide what words in what order you want to say to them in that minute. Here we go. 10 minutes starting now. You've spent about 3 minutes working on it. You've got plenty of time. All right, you've got 5 minutes. 5 minutes left, and at this point, some people are feeling finished. Like this paragraph is pretty much what I expect a good paragraph would be. If so, I'm going to encourage you simply to rewrite the whole thing again. Make a copy of it. Write another one. Try a different way. Try putting the key sentence at the beginning rather than the end. Try to put it in the middle. Try out some ideas. You have 5 minutes. Make the best use of them you can. You have 2.5 minutes left. It's important as you're going through these last 2 minutes that you arrive at a text that has no little extra marginal notes, no messiness, that it's just one sentence after another. That's the important thing. One word after another, and then it looks clean on the page like a paragraph. So that sort of composed impression is the one you're working for now for these last 2 minutes. All right, you've got about 45 seconds. Make sure you get it nicely cleaned up. It has to be presentable on the page. You still have 5 minutes left to fix things, but I'll give you those last 5 minutes in a moment. So we're 30 seconds left and then we'll stop. All right. Now we've spent 22 minutes writing so far out of that total 27-minute writing moment. And we are getting into the last 5 minutes. Now, remember that the whole point of this is that if you plan this out and you really in a disciplined way resolve to spend exactly 27 minutes writing, then you knew that those first 2 minutes were going to happen. You knew what you were going to be doing at that time, namely working on the key sentence. You then knew you were going to give yourself 10 minutes to generate sentences that were easier to believe, understand, or agree with. You then were going to give yourself 10 minutes to compose it into a coherent paragraph with a beginning and an end, and it just really is a nice finished moment, right? And so now you have 5 minutes to look it over, to see if it works. And what you're going to do is you're going to read out loud. I hope you're sitting in a location where that is not going to be too embarrassing to you. If you're sitting in a cafe or something, of course, that might, I don't know. I think you'll be fine with it. Just read the text out loud into the air. Give it the voice that you think it should have. So make sure that you're reading it with some sort of feeling and with some sort of intention, marking questions as questions and quotations as quotations and so forth. So read the paragraph out loud. That will take you about a minute or two. Reading out loud usually takes a little bit longer than reading internally. So give yourself a minute or two to read it out loud. That leaves you with about 3 minutes after that, 3 or 4 minutes. And at that point, you can really just let yourself be a perfectionist for 3 or 4 minutes, right? Try to make it as good as you can after this experience of having read it out loud for 3 or 4 minutes. And then I will stop you and we will take a break, right? So here we go. Oops. Yeah. I'm going to set the timer for 5 minutes. As soon as I say go, you will read out loud, and then you will spend the rest of the time editing. Here we go. Go. I imagine you're all done reading out loud now, so just polish, make it all nice and clean, tidy on the page. Remember, somebody else is going to be looking at this in just a moment. You have 30 seconds left. Remember that this will be the end of the paragraph writing. At this point, the paragraph is the shape it's going to be in for the feedback exercise. All right. Great. Now, what I'm going to encourage you to do now is to sort of step away from the screen, or just push back a little bit, as long as you can still hear me and so forth. And roll your shoulders a little bit, maybe do some arm exercises, something, right? Give yourself a little space. Under normal circumstances, I would say take a formal 3-minute break where you do nothing. So don't keep working on the paragraph. Don't even read it. You're done with the paragraph for now. You've given yourself the 27 minutes you said you would. This is as good as it's going to get this time around. You can, of course, always rewrite a paragraph anytime you want before you have to publish it. But this is the amount of time you gave yourself with this paragraph. Take a 3-minute break. That shows you that you've stopped writing, not because you don't have any more time, but because you've decided to stop, because you are a free consciousness. You are somebody that is in charge of the process. Yes, you have something else to do. You have emails to check. You have a class to teach. You have things you want to get on with. That's fine. But you're also not stopping your writing in order to get on with those things. You're stopping your writing because you said you would, because you are free, right? So take those 3 minutes and mark a boundary between the writing moment and the rest of your day. This even is the case if you've decided to write 4 paragraphs in 2 hours, which is certainly legitimate, right? So you plan out 4 paragraphs, 4 key sentences, and you put 3-minute breaks between each paragraph to tell yourself that this was the time we had for this paragraph, and now we have to give time to the next paragraph. So you're putting yourself in control of the process, and that's the important thing. Let me just go through how you would do feedback. The important thing about this feedback exercise is that it presumes that you've written the paragraph the way we just did, which means You made a clear decision about what you wanted to say by formulating a key sentence. Then you gave yourself 2 minutes to pitch it to the reader. You gave yourself 10 minutes to generate ideas. You gave yourself 10 minutes to compose them. You know what the key sentence is. You know what your rhetorical posture is. Are you supporting, elaborating, or defending? You have an idea about what the reader's attitude is supposed to be to this paragraph, namely finding it hard to believe, finding it hard to agree with, or finding it hard to understand. So because of that, you are in a position to receive feedback, even if it isn't judgmental. And this is very important. You're not asking your reader to judge. You are asking your reader to read. So when you're doing this feedback exercise, what you would do, and I will share my screen just so we have written it down here for you. What you will do is you will take 3, 6, or 9 minutes. You decide. In a workshop like this, I'd usually suggest doing 3 minutes because it's your first time trying it. You don't want to get stuck doing it, but you can actually do this for 9 minutes and you can get something out of it. What you will do is you will have your reader read it out loud. If you're doing it online like this, what you will do is you will give the text to your reader. You will send it to them, right? And they will read it. But you will turn off your camera and you will turn off your microphone as the writer, which means you're not going to give them any information. It's just like being a writer, actually. You're not there when the reader is reading. In this case, though, you get to watch the reader read and you get to hear the reader read your text out loud. And that is a gift to you. That is an experience. Remember, it is not a judgment. It is an experience. You will see what happens to somebody else when they are exposed to the words that you have chosen in the order in which you have chosen them, right? After they've read it out loud, they will tell you what they think the key sentence is. And remember that if you've done this deliberately, there is a right answer to that question. There is a sentence of one of the sentences in the paragraph that is the key sentence to the paragraph. It may be the first, it may be the last, it may be the second to last, it may be the second, it may be in the middle. It's where you thought it fit best, but where you were certain, or at least hopeful, that your reader would identify it as this is the point of the paragraph, right? So the reader is going to tell you what they think the key sentence is. They may even give you a little bit of reasoning, like at first I thought it was the first sentence, but then now that I've read it to the end, I think actually here in the middle, you kind of turned a corner and that's where you put the key sentence. This seems to be the right place for the key sentence. So that is something that the reader can do. The reader can explain to you why they think this is the key sentence. They may even say something like, I think it's actually unclear whether it's the first or the last sentence that is your key sentence. You seem to be doing two different things in this paragraph. I can't quite decide. They might say that. So they're thinking out loud, reasoning about what is the key sentence. Like you, they know it should have one, and they are trying to think along with it and decide what they think the key sentence is. Then they will tell you what they think the rhetorical posture of your paragraph is, which is to say whether or not you are trying to support, elaborate, or defend your key sentence. That does, in a certain sense, mean, especially if you've chosen your reader wisely, that your reader will tell you that they would have found this key sentence hard to believe, hard to understand, or hard to agree with. And you quite rightly are helping them with that, right? So that is how they may put it. Or they might say something like, you know, I don't actually find this hard to believe, but it does feel like you're trying to convince me it's true, right? So you're trying, like, as I read this paragraph, its intention is to get me to believe it, even though you don't need to, right? So that's another thing the reader might say. And if you're doing it for 3 minutes, that may be all that you have time for, is to get to there. If you're giving yourself 6 or 9 minutes, you may have time for a little more. And that's really open to the reader to say whatever they like. But what I would suggest is that you make it an experience and not a judgment. So don't say, I found this very interesting, or I think you write really well, or of course the opposite of that. Don't make a qualitative judgment on the writing. Instead, engage with the ideas. So give the writer a sense of, you have gotten me to believe it, or you haven't quite gotten me to believe it, or now I understand, or this is what I understand with this. Especially if you're defending yourself, the reader will have a chance to say, I still don't agree with you, and these are the reasons I have for still not agreeing with you, right? So the reader will engage with it at the level of ideas. Of course, that's what you want. You want a paragraph to provide that engagement for your reader. And as a writer, as you're getting this feedback, and like I say, if you're doing this properly, then you are not giving the reader, it's not a conversation. It's a one-way communication from reader to writer. You're not saying, yes, you got it right, thank you, and then starting a conversation. You're just sitting in silence and with a poker face on, listening. And if you're doing it online, the best way to put on a poker face is just to turn off your camera. So you're not giving any feedback to the reader. The reader's just thinking out loud at you. And then when the time stops, when the timer stops, you will say thank you, turn on the camera again, and not really debrief it. Just say thank you, sit there for a minute maybe, and then move on with your day. Try not to make it a big social event. Just make it those 3, 6, or 9 minutes of feedback on a single paragraph. You're trying to figure out how your writing works. You're not trying to figure out whether or not you're a good writer or a bad writer. You're not trying to figure out whether or not you've got a good or brilliant idea. You're just trying to figure out, how does this paragraph work? And you're comparing it to what you thought it would do, right? Because if you work deliberately for 27 minutes, or even 18 minutes, as long as you did it deliberately, you are getting information out of that interaction with the reader. And then next time you write, you have an experience to refer to when you're thinking about, how should I write this paragraph this time around?